Welcome, trailblazers and visionaries, to the Forging Manufacturing Podcast. I am your host, Dave Hampton.
And I'm your co-host, Jason Flores.
So for our first-time listeners, and welcome back, those who have heard us before, Forging Manufacturing goal is to provide insight and thought leadership to those working in, around, or simply just interested in manufacturing.
And we will bring you thought leaders who will share stories of success and achievement, or stories of failure and how they've overcome. And hopefully we'll all learn something new.
We have so far, and ultimately at the end of the day, we just want to walk away, want you to walk away entertained and have a roadmap to better, whatever better means for you. And on that note, today our guest is Rob Shaddock. So Rob has held many senior level executive roles within multi-billion-dollar global manufacturers, the likes of Motorola and TE Connectivity. I'm sure you've heard of them. He's been CEO of two smaller businesses, both of which were successfully acquired. Rob has a track record of leading innovation and building growth through product development and manufacturing transformation. So we're in great company. Now retired, Rob currently serves on a number of advisory boards and does consulting with startup manufacturers as well as large enterprises.
Speaking of the Motorola, Dave, company, so I think you told me, had a hand in developing the Razr phone back in the day.
Yeah, it's a great story, and I hope that we can get into that today with him.
Yeah, I loved that phone. I had one. Did you have one?
I did.
Yeah. I don't know who didn't, but cool. Sounds fun.
So, Rob, thank you so much for joining Forging Manufacturing. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you again too, Dave. It's been a while.
It has been, especially live and in the flesh. I think it's been over a year or 2 years probably at this point, I guess.
Yeah. You keep thinking it's been a year, and actually it's coming up to 2.
Right.
It's lingering, and still in the Bay Area.
Oh yeah, still here. Yeah, it's a great place to be. It'd be hard to leave.
Yeah, and your stack of books is just growing.
Yeah, that's my seismometer, I tell people.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you glue those together, or are they just balanced?
No, it's a cheat. There's a metal bar that runs up the back, and there's a plate about every 5 books.
Gotcha.
Well, Rob, you've had the fortunate opportunity to work with some of the largest, multi-billion-dollar global manufacturers, and I know your latest ventures. Since you've kind of I'll call semi-retired in a sense, that now you're sitting on advisory boards and work with a lot of other startup manufacturers and helping them get going. I'm just curious. It's such a diverse experience that you've had, and a really unique lens. Can you talk to me about your passion? Help us understand kind of what's got you going through all these years.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think actually it goes way back to when I was, I don't know, still in grade school, and I had a great uncle who we used to go and see every Sunday, and out the back of his place there was a workshop. And he would take me and my brother out there, and we would make stuff, just little toys, boats, cars. And he, of course, grew up where everything was hand tools, big hand braces. If it came to drilling a hole in a piece of steel, he worked for a company that made beds, and he designed some of their folding beds for them. But, he would do it all by hand. So it sort of instilled in me a love of making things. And I think that stayed with me all the time. And I've always tried to get involved in businesses and companies that are making stuff. No one would want my software. So, I stick to physical objects that you can actually hold in your hand.
Yeah. And so, in the spirit of making things, brings into the world of innovation, and so much has changed, especially now. But what do you see, as you're dealing with, you're still on the advisory boards and committees for some of the largest manufacturers out there, and you're, dealing with the startups, but the the ability to compete, and the technology is changing so rapidly. Could you name a few things that are exciting to you, and some of your key focus areas that are, it doesn't matter what size of manufacturer you are, these are the types of things that may either be opportunities or threats, depending on who you are.
Yeah, I think there's all of that. I think, there's this fantastic convergence of technology into manufacturing that's happened over the last 10 years. And, some of the things I notice is it's particularly for the startups, is that the choice of how and where you get things made has improved dramatically. And watching startups be able to go out, find easy access to 3D printers, but not just 3D printers, any kind of manufacturing service that you need is now so much more accessible. And that's really helped change the way people think about their product development, and giving them access to a lot more sort of ability to experiment and try stuff that I think was previously not there. And it's changed their, lowered the barriers to entry for companies that want to get in and make something physical. And of course, we've seen this, rethinking of how you make stuff with additive manufacturing. And like all these things, obviously it's been through its hype curve, and it now seems to be settled into that nice, long upward curve of adoption and improvement. And I think that's very exciting, because one of the things, apart from all the many different things you can do with additives, is it also makes you think about how you're going to structure the way you make things, in the sense that, when, manufacturing is always, this tricky balance of getting, you've got to have great quality, you've got to have it at the lowest possible cost, and you've got to have, ultimate availability and reliability in everything you do. It's really hard, and I don't think enough people really appreciate how these different forces on manufacturing, are at play for those people right in the middle of it. It's very easy to just say, try and adopt the new, go ahead, adopt the new technology, go do the impossible all the time. But manufacturing isn't always about doing that. But I think manufacturing is nothing about doing creating the impossible. I suppose it is that hard balance. But I think what additive has done is it's kind of changed the way you might think about some of these things, in that, traditionally you start off, you've got a part. The first question that anyone asks is, how many do I need to make? And, then they do their takt time calculations, and, they go off and design a process to try and meet takt times. Whereas with additive, you get this other dimension, which is maybe we can go sort of slow and flexible and parallel, rather than kind of fast and serial. We've all seen those images of rooms full of 3D printers churning out stuff, which kind of is a graphic for that thought, in that you've got lots of machines that run slowly, and you get your takt time by having a lot of them. So one of the things we've sort of played around with and experimented with at different times is, okay, maybe instead of trying to make one optimized line and then keep tweaking it and, trying to make it run a bit faster all the time, we do something that's cheaper, slower, and, flexible, and then just make lots of them to scale our manufacturing that way. And I think that's it's a thought that doesn't always work, but it's something that I think we're going to see an increasing adoption of in the sort of medium volume sort of manufacturing. And that, I think, is a really, really interesting change.
Yeah, I like the point you make about flexibility, because we're getting more information back from the consumers now, right? You can go through and process and make a product, and then all of a sudden you're getting feedback from the users saying, this needs to be tweaked, this needs to be tweaked. In a traditional manufacturing sense, that's very difficult to do, and it's a lot more expensive. But the flexibility of that 3D printing certainly gives you that ability to make quick changes.
Right, there's a sort of agile meets hardware somehow. It's an interesting paradigm to get into. But we're seeing a lot. There's a small company I'm involved with at the moment who I think have got a very clever product, and a lot of its value comes from it being easy for the trade contractors to install and use this product. And they know that they're going to go through, iterations. They're going to get it out to, several hundred users. They're going to get feedback. They're going to tweak the design, and they're going to go through 3 or 4 cycles of doing that before they get to a point where they have a mass production version of the product. So this flexibility is hugely important and a great pathway to getting better products.
So we've talked about this before, and change isn't easy. That's I mean, duh, right? But for those manufacturers that have these very legacy processes, very highly skilled workforce, but maybe aging, and but the reality is you need to continuously adapt. And what do you think are one or two of the biggest reasons why people or companies fail to change, maybe change fast enough? What are some of the biggest hurdles that you see?
Yeah, wow, good question. I think I've seen that a lot over the years. That and I think it's the very nature of manufacturing and what we're asking people to do. So I think it's sometimes a little bit too easy to sort of say, wow, you guys are too conservative or too slow to change. The very essence of what we ask our manufacturing teams to do is actually to be reliable and conservative and be on point and be on quality. And so into that you want to try and insert change. That's really, really difficult, and especially I think in many processes where historically they've not been super well instrumented, and so it's relied on expertise and knowledge and tuning to make the process work really well. There's often been a lot of expertise on the floor with the process that keeps it running and keeps optimizing it. So there's a couple of different things I think that start to happen from that. One is the first step I think towards change, and that we found has worked really well, is you start instrumenting your processes, and then you'll find new ways of improving and new insights into the process. But of course, you've got to do that with the people that are running the process. It always fails if it's the outside experts come in and try and tell you what to do. I've seen this with AI-based systems that monitor process and provide insights and prediction into how to tune the process, and inevitably that clashes with someone who's been running the process for a long period of time, particularly when the predictions are sort of somewhat counterintuitive as to what needs to be done. So you have to carry along the team with you. So as you're getting data and as you're getting insights into the process, you've got to carry that manufacturing team with you through that process and make them part of it. And that's kind of this issue of instrumenting, finding what normal is, and then finding ways of challenging normal. And then I think you've got this other thing going on, which is how do you introduce new technology and new techniques into a manufacturing environment? And we struggled a lot at various times with this, because many times the traditional way of doing this, you think of someone tries to put together a business case, and essentially it's we all know what business cases are like. There's a large degree of made up numbers in there that are trying to justify the conclusion that you want, and particularly when it's kind of proposals for massive change. So we've found it much more effective to that sort of you light small fires, you try and get small wins, and then use those to show people how a new piece of technology can work and where it can improve or change your manufacturing. But also, we've done things like, many years ago, we started looking at the use of robots for a lot of assembly operations. And, there's always been a labor cost versus capital cost trade-off go on there, and, how many years payback you get. And it was pretty clear that, the only thing that was going to happen with robots was they were going to get cheaper and better at doing the job. But it was still hard to put together, good coherent business cases to make this work. And, introducing new technology, and people have seen early generations of robots in manufacturing where and I don't mean the sort of, big welding robots on a car assembly line or something like that, but, small, flexible assembly robots, 3-axis, 4-axis kind of robots. And so what we started doing was saying to the plant operators, hey, look, let's pick a process here. We'll, code up and design a robot version of this process. And we're not going to charge your manufacturing P&L anything for doing this, or we'll take on all that development under some other research budget. We'll put it in, you run it. If it works and you like it, then we'll transfer the costs over to you. And so that worked incredibly well. And then, another thing that was done, and one of my team came up with this, was he started running competitions in the factories. And we would take this kind of model and we'd give a kind of robotic cell, and we'd make that, and then we'd make it available to teams in factories. And we'd run a competition where we'd say, go and automate one of your processes. And, then we'd have a sort of, bake off really between these different implementations and give them a prize. And we turned it into fun. We turned the technology introduction into a sort of competitive thing between factories, and made it a bit of fun. And, of course, this is that same principle of lighting lots of small fires. We were now lighting lots of fires around a network of factories to try and introduce this new technology.
That's incredible. And there's a lot there we could unpack. And yeah. I remember the last time we spoke, you actually said, one of the biggest barriers or one things that companies tend to do is, or I guess they're stopped by their imagination, which it sounds like what you've kind of developed this process and or fostered this whole innovative mindset and allowing ideas to come from anywhere. And I love that, small fires. And unfortunately, I haven't heard it enough, right? You hear the big companies, the Googles and the Skunk Works type projects and kind of behind the scenes. But I mean, you can really bring innovation and R&D forward, which sounds like you have done successful.
Yeah, it's fun, that's why you do this stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I think it, to that imagination thing, when you're looking at, how do you improve something? We've seen this in, a number of processes. Your imagination is often kind of limited by the experience you've had to date. So when someone else comes along, the consultants, the man from corporate, or some other annoying person, and says, hey, this needs to be 10% better, or why don't you do this? Your instinctive reaction is to look for all the reasons why it can't be done. And then, maybe you get into a conversation that's a bit deeper than that, and you're building on all your experience of things that have gone wrong in the past, things that have worked in the past. And it becomes sort of imagination limiting. And so, you have to kind of you have to set you have to set a new goal, and then try and help unlock people's imagination to get there. And that sounds great, but hard to do. So how? And I've found that this process of breaking it down into smaller things, not making stuff into big initiatives, but turning things into a set of small experiments, into a set of small ideas, helps you make progress and build to a bigger goal. Somewhere you've got to have that big goal that you're aiming for, but breaking that down into a bunch of small experiments and engaging the people in those small experiments seems to make it go a lot faster.
That engagement, like bringing that teamwork together. We talked a little bit last time about the negativity that can happen in an organization. And you're absolutely right. We've got to, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've tried a bunch of things and nothing seems to make anything better. But I think by bringing somebody in, that type of consultant, working in a team environment, I love the idea of having competitions. I think that's great. Just sort of breaks down that negativity, breaks down those barriers and helps you improve those little processes.
It's again, it almost comes back to that sort of small, slow, and parallel kind of paradigm.
Yeah. Also makes it easier to get budget once you have those small successes, right? It's a lot easier to prove out. It's not as theoretical at that point.
Right. Yes. I mean, that kind of goes as part of the same thing. Again, we certainly learned that in a couple of attempts to transform manufacturing, where we'd start off with, particularly we found with instrumenting and IoT, bringing IoT kind of into manufacturing, we'd sit down and put together a fantastic large business case, going back to the kind of made up numbers, but we'd go, we're going to get all these improvements and that will give all this payback. And and that's often the way it works. You need to present this business case and show all these paybacks, but really you don't know what you don't know, and you're estimating and guesstimating all the time, and so you finish up in all these long conversations where even if the numbers all make sense, there's doubters, there's people that see that and go, well, can I really, you really going to be able to do that? There's all these different factors. So again, it was much easier to just use a bit of budget that I've been lucky when I've been working in large corporations that we could do things within the rounding error of a budget. I've never had enough I guess patience to get into the last rounding point of my budget anyway, as my bosses will always have told you.
Rounding errors. Just rounding errors.
You try and find a little bit of money somewhere, figure out that little experiment that you're going to run, and then you can kind of build on that. In one area, when we're starting to introduce IoT, we went through exactly this process. We had, long pitches of how we needed to spend, $5 million, and here's going to be all these benefits, et cetera, et cetera. It was going nowhere. And then we sort of said, let's pick a machine in one of the factories and we'll instrument it. And so we instrumented it. And I guess to a certain extent, we got lucky, but we found that this machine, every so often it would stop and an operator would open a door and fiddle with something and close it, and then the machine would run again. Okay, this is a bit, it's a bit odd. And, if we add all this up over a 24-hour period, we're losing about an hour of production every day. But because it came in these tiny little steps that everyone thought was normal, it never really got super investigated. I mean, this is just normal. The machine would stop, and it took a few tens of seconds for someone to just solve the problem and have the machine running again. And even when people were doing their OEE and manual measurements, they'd see this happen maybe a couple of times in the hour that they were measuring, and they just go, that's kind of normal. So we discovered these micro stops, and then suddenly we had a business case. So now instead of having a theoretical business case that we'd kind of made up with estimates of how much productivity we might get, we actually had something we could point to. And then we could build our business case around that. So we learned pretty early on that, you know, it was much better to just find a little bit of money somewhere to instrument something, get some data off it. And then we were building business cases with real numbers. And then when people saw this, you know, they suddenly had a lot of enthusiasm for what we were trying to do. And we could take that model and take it across more processes and more lines and more plants. And then, you know, maybe we got a little bit lucky, but, you know, we found something there that we could find across all sorts of different types of process. So we'd looked at an assembly machine to start with. And then we started looking at, well, what happens in our stamping plants? Oh, hey, look at that. You get a similar thing, different causes, you know, maybe a reeler would stop occasionally. And again, it was this sort of, well, this is treated as normal. It was a, you know, something that happens. They can fix whatever went wrong very quickly, but no one then went to the next level and said, well, how do we stop this happening at all? Because it didn't seem to happen often enough. You know, it wasn't worth the effort. There was, you know, you've got to keep the process running, you've got to keep making parts. And this was just something a little bit annoying, but no one had the time, nor did they have the tools and skills to go and figure it out. Whereas once we started instrumenting it, we could see what was really happening. And there was different causes, and, you know, we'd put high-speed cameras in some places and stuff like that to just help them figure out what was going on. But this sort of process again of you know, starting small, instrumenting as something, and then using that as a teaching example and as a foundation for business cases really helped us, you know, make improvement and changes across manufacturing.
That's such a good point. I mean, you know, everybody runs through these little hiccups that happen on a day-to-day, and they're infrequent, but once you start measuring it, right, you realize the impact that it'll have across a day, a week, a month, a year. Such a good point.
Yeah, no, it was surprising, and it transformed the way we thought about, you know, how we were going to do more and more upgrade and digitization of our processes, and it turned everything into a sort of model of, you know, let's instrument first, and then, you know, see if we find something that can then turn into a business case and a, you know, transformation program.
It really is such a good lesson to question everything. You know, what if we could eliminate this little hiccup, you know, that happens 3 times a day? What would happen, right? It's just such a great point.
Well, first you need to measure how big the hiccup is. That was the real insight.
But you know what? That also then brings challenges. I mean, the more introspective, I guess, a business and the business leaders become, then it starts to become a challenge and priority. And I'm very fascinated with how companies start to prioritize when everybody has maybe their own agendas and their own issues, and there's finite budgets. Can you speak to any process or a philosophy or whatever that you've found successful to help not only uncover, you've talked about how to kind of take the small steps, but how do you even then, once you have a bunch of different things identified, have you found a pretty decent way to help companies understand how to prioritize what to focus on first?
Oh, that's wow, where do you start?
That's right.
You know, I think you know, prioritization is always it's always tough, and you know, so, you know, every company has, you know, their favorite method for trying to do that. You know, they're going to have a return on invested capital, or they're going to, you know, whatever. They've got some metrics that they're going to use. And I found that you know, part of the trick really is to have multiple advocates for this whole idea of lighting all these small fires. Means that actually you finish up with, this isn't necessarily going to help answer the question of how you prioritize, but it increases the importance of making decisions about moving forward. Is that if you lit a lot of small fires, then you have a lot of people wanting to make change. And that drives some urgency through the decision-making process. Because quite often, prioritization discussions can become something that keeps getting shifted down in time as people ask for more data, and people as well, of course, game the numbers for their favorite project. But if you have lots of advocates for making change, then the prioritization process gets a sense of urgency. So that's kind of an important thing to do.
Yeah, and I actually am thinking about that too, that the essence of lighting those small fires, like you're saying, kind of takes a little bit of the onus off of having this strict prioritization. I've got to get this massive capital budget just to tackle this one issue. You can actually do a bunch of little things at the same time, and then let data start speaking for you. I guess data can help drive your, what's the greatest impact back to the organization if it takes the same resources, I guess, to cause change.
Yeah, exactly. To me, the big thing is that you're bringing higher quality data into that decision-making process. And I think that's the really important piece, because I think one of the challenges with prioritization is if the underlying data is poor, then it leads to no one's satisfied with the outcomes, and you also know that you're probably leaving stuff off the table that could be beneficial. And this always happens. Prioritization is not really a perfect process, because it just depends on. It's perfect in the sense that if you set a bunch of rules around it and you follow those rules, then the process is working great. But the problem is that the metrics you've used in those rules, may or may not be the right one, and you're always going to have these long-term versus short-term trade-offs, and it's difficult. Prioritization is generally not easy in my experience. I don't mean that it's not easy to make a decision. It's just hard to pick often hard to pick the right choices. And this process of keeping, lots of small activities that you can then get better data really helps inform a prioritization process. And, in my experience, it's also that has then driven, people thinking at a higher level about the budgets and how they're going to allocate the money, because that's, it's really a resource allocation problem. So and your goal as someone trying to transform a manufacturing environment or technology, or introduce new technology, is to get more of your budget allocated to doing that, first of all, measuring and research and data analysis, and then more of the budget allocated towards the outcomes that you want, looking at those programs and scaling them up. And you really get the scaling money when you can present great data. And then hopefully you want to get to the point where you have an embarrassment of riches, that you're making your prioritization decisions based on, which one of these 5 good ideas are you going to scale first, rather than, making decisions about trying to create those ideas in the first place. I'm going around in circles talking the same thing here, but
or rather, making the decision of doing nothing, right? You got to do something at least.
Yeah. But again, that comes back to these, small fires.
Right.
You're kind of, you're doing something, you're providing more data, you're gathering information. And I think it's sort of intuitive to many people. It's just, in a typical environment, particularly manufacturing is hugely budget conscious. It can be really hard even to get the budget to just light the first fire. And so, bringing it round again to this aspect of getting excitement and enthusiasm going. A lot of these things happen because, you've got people that put in that little bit of extra effort, a little bit of personal time. They kind of work around the corners of their day job in order to try out this little first fire or get something done. So you want to encourage in the environment as a whole this idea of trying, experimenting, and being a little bit competitive. And that was where our competitions really helped. It set people thinking about it, and then if people are enthusiastic and interested in it, they'll find a way of trying their first little experiment. And they'll reach out to other people. And that's the other thing I suppose that we haven't really talked about, more so for bigger organizations than small organizations, is helping build this network across plants and across groups where people can bounce ideas off each other. So one of the things we found about running these competitions was that we'd expanded networks across manufacturing plants, which wasn't something that normally happened. People would be networked at the higher levels of the hierarchy, but the guys down on the floor who can be the best observers and the best change agents, and in a way that's part of course what the whole lean manufacturing process tries to get to. It's actually thinking about it, it's the same thing. It's trying to get insights right from the folks at the coalface, as it were. But what we were able to do was improve these people's networks, so they could reach out because of the competitions, because they'd met people trying to do similar things. They could bounce ideas across each other. They could share ideas and stories and expertise, and that really helped change the dynamics. And I think it's something that's not, when you're doing transformation and trying to make a lot of change, it doesn't, in manufacturing or anywhere else, if you can actually extend the network of the people at the coalface, so they can talk to people at other coalfaces, that's a powerful change agent and an enabler.
That's incredible. And just talk about the cultural impact that can have for that company too. So it makes people feel like they have more of an ownership, and it brings people together within their own organization when they're just maybe typically just task oriented or on their own job. So I think it has, even outside of just change and innovation, I think just culturally within a company, that's phenomenal.
And
Love
also,
that.
Dave, I think you and I both have seen some success connecting networks, not outside of other organizations, right? We know we can do that inside an organization. We've certainly seen the trend for process improvement teams, but connecting other manufacturers has been hugely successful for some of my network, my folks in my network as well.
Mm-hmm.
They run into the same problems, right? They're a little bit different, but they all seem to have the same type of problems.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You find lots of people are trying to solve the same kind of problem.
Yeah. Company making chairs and then one making conveyor systems and dental equipment.
Right.
I don't care what you're making. They still have supply chain issues and manufacturing capacity issues and technology. So and you're dealing with people.
And I think actually taking it maybe going back to some of the things we were talking about before, where you have people that have tended to grow up with a process, and they've learned its intricacies, and they've been in this, they're kind of in this box for long periods of time. Networking them with other people is very powerful, because that normally wouldn't have happened. So now we're connecting them across to other groups and other people that have been in their box.
So and thank you so much for your time. And I really have maybe 1-2 more questions in total. And we'd be remiss without talking about a project that I just think is fascinating. I'm sure we could probably talk for hours on many aspects of it, but you were in charge of in charge of R&D and development for when you were at Motorola for a pretty game-changing. I mean, you really set the stage. I think you and your team set the stage for where we are today when it comes to mobile And you can speak much more to this, but can you talk about the project? I guess the Razr. It's just very. Actually, saw something or an article recently within the last couple of months, because I think Motorola is going back in the Razr direction or something with the development there.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. That was interesting, and my job really was to provide air cover for the team. It was a really interesting project, and it started actually with the group's CTO, guy called Ralph Peeney, who tasked his team to see how thin they could make a cell phone, and they built this prototype that was like, I think, 10 millimeters thick at the time for a hinged phone, and very, very, very cool concept. Held together with bits of tape and everything else, but it showed what was possible, and it caught people's imagination. So then it was okay, if we're going to productize this, transfer it into the product teams. I happen to be running them, and then it was, okay, let's find a put together a team, find the right kind of personalities to be in that team. Again, folks who naturally had great imagination and a willingness to keep chiseling away at hard problems until they solved them. There's some exceptional people there. There was a team lead, Roger Jellicoe, his immediate boss, Tracy Koziel, who was running the product management for that team, and great mechanical lead with Gary Wise and a whole team of people there, and many people who I'm not even talking about. It was a huge team effort, but at the same time, it was also something very different. So, my job was more the air cover.
Enable innovation, take the roadblocks out of there, right?
Well, we had discussions about how, because one way you could think about Razr was that, you'd taken, a fat, chubby phone of the time and hit it with a sledgehammer. So guess what? It had got thin but wider. So there was quite a lot of debate about how maybe it would be too wide a phone, that, small female hands wouldn't like it. And then because we had limited space, it had a relatively low resolution camera. It just had a VGA, maybe a 640 pixel resolution camera at the time. And, at the time, people were moving to megapixel cameras in phones. So, there was a lot of discussion about whether this would be, a negative. And so, at one level, there was all that kind of discussion. And, as I say, my principal job was to make sure that we kept spending money on it, and that none of these nothing's got in the way. We knew we had a winner, though. Our marketing lead, Jeffrey Frost, a brilliant marketing guy, was super enthusiastic for the project, and we had lots of sort of small indicators. I remember one night, we used to have some of our team meetings in a local pub. And we took a couple of prototypes in there and asked for some opinions from the bar staff. And I still remember one of the girls sort of taking this, and she took the phone and shoved it into her back pocket of her jeans, and she said, "Oh, that's great! I can put the phone in there." And so we had this again. We had some sort of anecdotal data that told us we were onto a winner. But really interesting project. I mean, the guys did some fantastic work with the keypad, which was completely revolutionary and beautifully designed. The castings for the frame, the use of new materials. We were lucky to have a talented team and a group of people that were determined to solve the problem. It was exciting. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I gotta say, when I saw the marketing on that phone, when they threw it down into stuck right into the concrete, I knew I had to have one.
Well, we also found that, you know, there's interesting things that happened because of the nature of the phone. You know, we had the antenna in a completely different place. So the antenna was down at the base of the phone, near the microphones, rather than being at the top by your head. And that meant that we could get a really high performance radio now. And because we weren't having to, we had more freedom in terms of the amount of power we could use, because, you know, in cell phones, you know, you have all these rules and regulations about, you know, absorption of radiation into the body and stuff like that. So by having the antenna down and out more in free space, we were able to optimize the radio. And you know, years later, I've still had conversations with people on boats and ships where they'd say, "Oh, that was a great phone. It was the only phone that I could use. You know, when we were halfway out of the harbor, I could still get coverage." So there was just a ton of innovation, and they were all, you know, it was a combination of lots of different pieces of innovation and improvements that turned into a great product.
It's an incredible story. And yeah, we've read a lot and done research leading up to now. And it's just, it's amazing. And, you know, I think it's got to be pretty heartwarming, pretty a proud moment to see kind of what you've helped be a part of with an incredible team, as you mentioned, to kind of shape an industry. And so it's just, it's awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So and maybe this is my last question for you, Rob, is, you know, what are you most proud of in your career? And maybe a project, or if you can think of one thing, maybe that was it. Don't want to lead the witness, but you know, what are you most kind of, if you were to look back?
Actually, I think, you know, although Razr, you know, it was a lot of fun, and I was fortunate to work with some exceptional, talented people on that program. Actually, I think it's more some of the things I did recently in terms of this manufacturing transformation. I really enjoyed watching this sort of wave of technology and awareness and understanding of the technology sweep through, you know, manufacturing organization. And I think it's because, you know, because I like making things. That's kind of what drives me. Watching that change and making that change happen, and bringing that change to an organization that was already a fantastic manufacturing operation, but hadn't yet seen the potential of some of this new technology. That I really enjoyed. Mm-hmm. that I'd do again.
That's awesome. And we can drop the mic on that one. Yeah, no, I can't thank you enough. And I mean, you've had a lasting impact on me, you know, from years ago, and sitting on the TE, the Science Advisory Board, and, you know, helping us, you know, at the time with Autodesk coming in and getting to sit around some brilliant minds at TE Connectivity. That was, and to hear the real world challenges. And I mean, you kind of, you brought a lot of you and I forget the other gentleman's name at SRI.
Bill Jeffrey.
Bill Jeffrey. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I mean, you guys brought a lot of amazing people and ideas and companies in, and that was just that really set a high bar for, I think, how some manufacturers just need to step back every once in a while and start looking at where technology is going, what other processes and companies are doing to enable you to grow. So you've had a huge impact on me, Rob. So thank you for spending your time here. And this was phenomenal.
Yeah, it's great meeting you, Rob.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, it's been fun. It was great to reconnect, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully if you ever get back to the East Coast, or I make it back to the West Coast when traveling's all completely opened up and no worries, yeah, love to have dinner again.
That would be great. Yeah, one day we'll be traveling. I need to get the motorcycle riding across country again.
There you go. Well, Jason, how enlightening was that?
Yeah, that's cool. He's a really cool guy.
Yeah,
Fun to talk to.
Yeah, I've been in a few different events and even private dinners with Rob, and the man just oozes knowledge.
Yeah.
So anytime you get a chance to sit down for a half hour, 45 minutes with him, I think we all walk away better, which is ultimately the goal here, right?
Yeah, indeed. I really liked how he talked about change and change management, working as a team to give everybody the clear picture of why they're changing. And also the contest. I think the contest is a really good idea. I think a lot of times, I've walked many manufacturing floors in our sport coats, and we always get funny looks as to what we're doing there. But just by bringing everybody together as a team, explaining the changes that they want to work on or the process they want to work on, I think that is a road for success for sure.
Yeah, that tribal knowledge that walks through on the floors and then walks out the door of manufacturers over time, right? And that's it's a fun way and a great way to build culture and to build innovation within a company. Something else that really resonated with me, it's funny, we hear manufacturers trying to prevent fires and put out massive fires.
Right.
It's like it seems very reactive, and it's a different paradigm shift when you hear Rob say, let's start some small fires.
Right. Controllable fires.
Controllable. Yeah. Right. But it's a fire and that burden to innovate and to get better. And that's what we all need to do. I don't care if you're a manufacturer or not. I think every company in some shape or form needs to innovate and improve in order to survive and thrive.
Yeah. Right. Looks like you got a fire behind you.
That's it. Well, thank you everybody for joining Forging Manufacturing. We'll see you next week.
See you later.